I'm going to formally welcome and invite you all in. My name is Lauren Backus, and it's an honor to have you all here today. Before we begin, we take a moment to recognize the space and time in which we gather. It's our usual practice to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral homelands of the Seminole and Miccosukee tribe of Indians of Florida. We further acknowledge the Calusa, Jaega, Miami, and Tequesta, indigenous peoples who have cared for, stewarded, and shaped this place long before us, and whose descendants continue that stewardship today. At this moment, we also honor those here in this room, city, state, country, in this present moment, artists, cultural workers, friends and neighbors, community members, all of whose presence is vital and whose lives are worthy of respect. Today's conversation brings together a remarkable group of artists whose practices illuminate the deep connections between material, memory, and cultural identity. This panel gathers expert dyers from across the US and Latin America to explore how natural dyes carry ancestral knowledge, how color itself can become a vessel for living memory, preserving traditions shaped by land, labor, and care. Our participating artists are Diana Eusebio, Christina Day, Porfirio Gutierrez, each of whom approaches natural dyeing as both technical mastery and as an act of cultural continuity. Here at MOCA, Miami, and I have not forgotten you, Kandy, I'm giving you a full introduction. Here at MOCA North Miami, we've had the pleasure of presenting Diana's exhibition Field of Dreams, in which she transforms textiles through botanical dyes into works that map migration, belonging, and collective history. Her practice brings a deeply personal lens to the way natural color becomes a language of memory and identity. And guiding our discussion today is Kandy G. Lopez, an Afro-Caribbean visual artist, an associate professor in the Department of Communication, Media, and Arts at Nova Southeastern University. Kandy's work explores material and metaphor to represent and honor marginalized individuals, creating dialogues rooted in culture and memory. Her practice bridges representation and experimentation, grounded in care and community. She's exhibited widely across the US and abroad, including at the Orlando Museum of Art, where she received the 2025 People's Choice Award, and most recently presented her first international solo exhibition at the Florence Foundation in Paris. Her work is held in museums and private collections nationally and internationally. Please join me in welcoming Kandy and our panelists for today's conversation at MOCA.
Thank you guys for being here. I am so excited to be part of this conversation. I'm really excited that Diana Eusebio also invited me to be the moderator. This is my first time doing this, so I am super hyped. I did my research, and I'm here to ask a lot of questions that deal with process, identity, culture, and the history behind those things. So welcome to Conversations at MOCA. I want to give thanks again to those who put this stuff together. I know that this takes a long time. The photographers, the people that set up, staff, Lauren, thank you so much. As Lauren said, this panel brings together expert dyers from across the US and Latin America to explore how natural dyes carry ancestral knowledge and living memory, preserving cultural identity through materials that hold a soul shaped by land, labor, and tradition. With that being said, this conversation will focus more on process, technique, and identity. And I'm gonna intro the panelists. Starting off with Diana Eusebio. She's a Peruvian Dominican textile artist who's based in Miami. Her artistic practice is centered on color, obviously, and its cultural significance. She researches natural dyed textiles from indigenous Latin America and Afro-Caribbean traditions, recognizing their connection to nature and their role as carriers of ancestral wisdom. Eusebio's fusion of ancestral and modern techniques, including dyeing and photography, contributes to contemporary culture preservation and celebrates the rich heritage and pre-Columbian knowledge embedded within these communities. Her work is a powerful testament to the enduring cultural tapestry of these regions. Eusebio holds a BFA in fiber from Maryland Institute College of Art. She has presented her work at the MoMA, Hall of Nations, the Gregg Museum of Art and Design, and Rubel Museum. Studio residencies include Anderson Ranch Arts Center in Aspen, Colorado, Red Hooks Labs in New York, Ulai Arts in Miami, Airy Fellowship in the Everglades National Park, Index MOCA Art Fair in Dominican Republic, the Deering Estate Studio Residency in Miami. Awards include the Obama administration's U.S. Presidential Scholar in the Arts, the highest national honor for a young artist, the National Young Arts at the George M. Perez, which was a $25,000 award, which is amazing, and the inaugural Night Artist Housing Award, supporting her current 2-year residency at Bakehouse. At Ulite, and then she's at Bakehouse right now. Our next panelist is Christina P. Day, also known as Chrissy. Her art practice recontextualizes roles related to materials lifespan. She's a designer, fabricator, owner, and a maintainer. Her I can't say that, buildings language stems from textile design strategy and is focused on the conversation of material as context. Her work takes form in architectural installation, surfacing methods, textile pattern logic, and physical match findings. Day is a current chair of the fiber department at Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, where her teaching focuses on cloth production, methods, and experimental fashion. Recent exhibitions and research on material history has been completed at the Philadelphia International Airport, the Catskill Art Space in New York, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Arlington in Virginia, the Winterthur Museum, Garden and Library, the Hagley Museum and Library, and the Kirkcaldy Museum in Scotland. She maintains her home and studio in PA in Philadelphia. And our last finalist is Porfirio Gutierrez. He's a multidisciplinary Zapotec textile artist based in Ventura, California. He uses traditional Zapotec technology of materials and redefines Zapotec weaving language to create works that communicates contemporary experiences and the complexity of the Americas today. Gutierrez's expertise is based on a family legacy of Tredell loom weaving and ancestral knowledge of materials and seasonal cycles that result in an unlimited palette of natural colors. He departs from traditional woven motifs in his compositions, exploring the boundaries of his own creative expression and distinct experiments. Through his practice, he asks us to rethink narrow definitions of contemporary art. While in Zapotec there is no word for artist as an occupation, there is a long-held concept of valuing those who hold wisdom within their community. Gutierrez's interpretation of ancestral weaving techniques and motives opens a new dialogue in the imposed dialectic of art versus craft, which he sees as serving little purpose in furthering contemporary indigenous creative expression. Breaking with that tradition is where he finds ultimate freedom as an artist. So let's give a round of applause for our panelists. To start off the conversation, I do want to give a little backstory of how we got here, right? Who am I? How were we connected? I think that's important. So I'm seated next to Diana, and I've known her work as a Miami artist myself, but we found each other in Dominican Republic at the MOCA Fair. Even though we lived like 20 minutes away here in Miami, we met each other there. So there's a connection there of being Dominican as well. And Diana knows Chrissy because she was her former fiber professor at MICA. I also went to MICA, so there's a connection there for a year. Yeah, so MICA's in the house. And then Porfirio's work, Diana became very inspired and excited to see someone who's also taking the land and educating those within these communities of how to make natural dyes. And also, Chrissy took a workshop with Porfirio. an online one at that. So those are our connections. Conversation intro. So I wanted to just give a little definition of what a craftsperson is, according to Homo Faber, which is a cultural movement centered and created for artisans. Its signature projects are educational programs for the next generation, and it's also an international biennial celebration on an online guide. It's one of the most recognizable platforms that deals with craftspeople. So the heritage craft person's masters a precise know-how and traditional techniques that are embodied in skills and a recurring practice. They might be following in the footsteps of family, craft, heritage, or practicing a craft that is traditionally linked to a specific territory or region. Their authenticity is not that of an artist, but rather that of the respect for tradition, culture, territory, and her gesture. And I think the three panelists that are up here represent what that definition is. So to start off questions, my first question is, what traditional techniques do you use? So as part of my research, I've watched videos of how colors are made, of how important the ways that those materials reflect the story or the narrative that's happening within the work, and how heritage comes into that. So I really want to focus on what traditional techniques do you use. We could start with you, Diana.
Sure, yeah. I do want to say thank you guys for coming all this way. I know we had a few people fly in from Philadelphia, from California. I really appreciate you guys and the museum for hosting us and doing this, putting this all together. And thank you, Kandy, for bringing us all together and moderating and bringing the questions. Yeah, so what traditional materials am I using? Techniques. I specialize in natural dyes, and I find natural dyes as a way for me to connect to my heritage. So being from Peruvian and Dominican heritage, it's a great way for me to kind of tie the three places I call home together. I was born in Miami, and so when I think of home, I don't know if it's a geographical location, and so the traditional techniques I use kind of allow me to connect to those places, right, and find home through color. So I'm working at natural dyes, harvesting the dyes myself if I can here in Miami or in Peru or in DR through residencies like the one we met at. And then researching to find the history behind it, and also talking to family. And I think that's important too, to note that tradition can be passed on orally that way, not just through researching online or things like that. So a little bit of everything, but all under the umbrella of natural dyes.
So since you were talking about the history of family and culture, I'm going to ask Porfirio that same question, and then I'll come back to you, Chrissy. What traditional techniques do you use?
First, Chandan, Kechinadina Be, Razonedius Navalaste Yutu. Reciban un cordial saludo de la Nación Zapoteca. Please receive greetings from the Zapotec Nation. Thank you, Diana. Thanks, everyone and this wonderful institution for the opportunity to be here. And what tradition do I work based off? Zapotec tradition, or in our culture, we call ourselves Benjiji. That's who we are as natives. And I work based on that tradition. It's a continuation of techniques that my ancestors developed for our existence as people. It's at least 10,000 years. And I try to honor those processes, and I try to be connected to that DNA information that that has existed and have developed within their family lineage and community.
Thank you. Same question for you.
Okay, my answer to this is going to have a circumference. And the reason why is because my relationship to dye work actually starts as being a production dyer in New York City. I was working for the fashion industry through a company called Dynamics in New York that was literally doing color matching for all kinds of reasons that were super specific. Theater, dance, puppetry, commercial, TV, production. So learning how to change the color of any material was the name of the game with that job. And I had an on and off relationship with that studio for about 6 years. And when I left it, I decided to recenter my studio practice as something that I needed to spend the bulk of my energy on. But what didn't leave me was the sense of nuance of color that you have to pay attention to when you're adjusting a color to match something. As it goes with studying technique, I think sometimes we can come very close to a technical skill, study it, master it, and then it like graduates into like other conversations. I would say I'm in like an outer orbit at this point in relation to literally the conversation of dyeing, but I am still paying close attention to the meaning of color as a representation of time. This is very interesting to be seated between two people that have direct contact with cultural heritage and tradition, because I don't have that. And I realized, so this is always what happens with the show, that you realize something because you're in dialogue with others about what it is that you do. And because of my own immigrant background in the United States, I don't actually know anybody beyond my grandparents. And because I also lost a lot of people at a young age in my family, my artwork has always been about trying to find people again and losing information through others and not having a touch point. So a lot of the work, like these pictures that are moving by, are about missing information and being on top of somebody else's design work and being in dialogue with them because I don't know them. So my answer is like the absolute inverse of what they're talking about. But that, this is a panel, so here we go. Yeah.
That was great. My second question is, how do you balance tradition and personal artistic expression? We could start with you, Chrissy.
That's coming back to me
Yeah,
immediately.
yeah.
That's an interesting question because, again, when I have found material completely out of context, which is going to go by real quick, but just remember that for a second. That vinyl that's on the wall right there, that's a sculpture that was made out of seat vinyl that was taken off of a chair that I found in a junkyard. And that's not a color that I actually dyed. It ambered itself into that color. I could have dyed it. I know how to dye that. I teach that all the time in my classes of how to change exactly that material. But I thought when I originally found that object that I was responding to the furniture, but then I realized what I was looking at was the color. And I could not believe that this synthetic material had aged itself, because that material will never die. And by dye, I mean D-I-E, not D-Y-E when I say that. But I was thinking about color as a carrier of somebody else's time. So yeah, my answer again is like out of left field for that. Did I answer the question?
How do you balance tradition with personal artistic expression?
I improvise. Mic drop. Okay.
That was good. Okay, we could go to you, Diana.
Okay. I think that, so I want to give context too, because I think it was when I was at MOCA, so I was studying, and Chrissy was my professor, and I'm learning literally how to dye in every shape and form. So we were dyeing like with synthetic dyes, but also natural dyes. And so I remember learning all of it, and it was a very overwhelming semester. Just like this is a lot of techniques, but rich in so much technical knowledge that now I can dye things, which is good. But I felt like I needed to bring in some of my personal history or tradition into it, just for me to have like that inspiration and continue making. Yeah.
Can you give an example, like
Yeah,
out of one of
yeah,
the
that's a
pieces
good-
in this space that talks about that?
Sure. Actually, the piece that's over here with the yarn hanging from it, it's a smaller quilt that's not framed, to the over here in this direction. That's maybe one of the eldest pieces that's in the show, just because at that point I didn't know how to combine my digital printed photography on fabric with the natural dyes. So I knew how to dye things naturally. I knew how to dye things synthetically, but I only knew how to print on polyester. And I began to explore how to print on cotton in order to be able to naturally dye it. So that piece is when I'm trying to figure out how to combine really tradition of natural dyeing techniques and my family's history and these stories. And so you see like a family photo and there's a whole narrative to that, but I couldn't add the color that I wanted. So I was adding it digitally. I was editing the image. But then, as you can see, I figured out how to print onto cotton, and that changed a lot. So the colors started to be more subdued, and I think, and just more natural, the color palette changed. And now I find it a lot more inspiring to have that balance of tradition and dye work. And the storytelling could come in through the color itself, not just the imagery.
That's great. Porfirio, same question. How do you balance tradition with personal artistic expression? I know that you use a lot of symbolism within your works. I know that the triangles are really important when it comes to the symbolism of butterflies. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Since I am connected to a community, I have some real responsibility for that community. There's natural dye was already extinct by the time I was born and raised. So it has been such a great interest within my artistic journey to revitalize. So it took me a long time. Took me about 2 years to revitalize this tradition. But even though I revitalize this tradition and implement them within my work, they do not belong to me. They belong to my ancestors and to the community. It's part of our intellectual property as community. And so where do I insert myself there? I believe so in the last few years, I have been touching on subjects that really expresses my personal experiences, like migration, like perception about indigenous people, like borders, these intersection of contemporary art and native technology and symbolism. So all those things has been part of my personal experience, but still touches on cultural objects or material that I'm able to then operate in a much more, much more a place where I don't have to perhaps worry so much about the community. And not only that, I've migrated, so I've been in California for the last 30 years, but I'm still tied to a community. And so by operating in this space, it allows me to talk about things that are beyond cultural materials, cultural matters, and beyond just cultural materials in terms of color. I think it's really important. That has helped me tremendously to be able to communicate those things, and that's where my own experimentation and my own way to make comes into play.
Perfect. Talking about materials, how do you choose your materials, and do they hold cultural or symbolic meaning? Which you answered a little bit. So maybe let's start with Diana with this question.
Sure. I would say I primarily use 7 different dyes. I'll use an array of color, right? I get almost all the colors from those dyes, but then I focus mainly on the primary, so it'd be what you see on the walls. So I'm looking at it now. It's cochinilla. I'll use Spanish moss or marigold for the yellow, and then for blues, indigo. So cochinilla is red and pink. But also a variety of color. But I would say that the color red for me is like one of the most important. It is the reason why I got inspired to work in it. My mom's actually sitting here in the front row, and she would tell me stories of her upbringing in Peru and having access to cochinilla, just growing regularly in the backyard, and she would harvest it sometimes to take it to the market and it's one of the most valuable dyes. And so I remember her telling me about that briefly growing up. She would tell me a lot of stories. Both my parents tell me a lot of stories, as a lot of people do. Like, I feel like first generation Americans just get like all the stories from like back in the day we used to do this. So I remember having that story and then learning about it at MOCA and not knowing, like I felt there was a connection there, but I couldn't recall why. It became my favorite color, and then it became like the reason why I got into natural dyes, because I felt like there was that tie to my background, to my mom, to her stories, to her childhood, and it very quickly became one of the favorite colors that I work with, and it is for that reason, it is the first color you see when you enter the space, when you enter the exhibition. So it's an introduction, and then you see the family photo in red of all 5 of us here in Miami. And it's around that time when I'm 3 years old that she's telling me these stories, and I'm developing memory at that time. So I think, yeah, those are the colors. So I'll work in red a lot, but then yellow and blue will give me the ability to make any color because of the primaries. So I can mix and match. And Spanish moss ties me more to Miami, and it is everywhere. It's present in the trees. It's native also to DR and Peru, but it represents those 3 places for me. And indigo has a long history also in the Southeast U.S. with the transatlantic slave trade, and then within the Dominican Republic with the transatlantic slave trade, and in Peru has a long history. And one of the first natural dyed archaic fabrics were found in Peru, so it's from centuries ago. And so I like to dive into those histories, and that's what informs the colors that I choose to work with, their origin, and I try to harvest them myself or get them from those places.
Thank you. Chrissy, I know that you work with a lot of different materials. So how do you choose what materials you're going to use? And do they hold any cultural or symbolic meaning? Which, yes.
Yeah. So for me, okay, I'm gonna just tell like a brief little personal thing here. This, I think, has a lot to do with this. When you get to a certain age and you look back on how much you've made, you start to see like a through line through all of it. And I just want to say that I'm married to somebody that I'm 4 days older than in the same year. So we're actually stellar twins. And also, the name that his parents had ready for him, if he was going to be a girl, because they didn't know his gender, was Christina. So the fact that there's something going on there about finding a match that's actually been inside of my work the whole time, and I didn't realize it until a lot later on, that every which way I was saying it is about twinning and matching. And that's, it's ironic that like studying a field of color matching, it was actually in the trade that I was getting paid for just on it, in my job. I always like to say, like, you can't take your art goggles off when you're an artist. Your whole life is like, you look through it with those goggles on. So, yeah, my relationship to, I think the origin, start with the question again, would you? I just wanted to tell you that because I think it's kind of an important backstory.
That was
moment.
good. How do you choose your materials, and do they
Right.
hold cultural or symbolic meaning?
Okay, I choose my materials largely because I like to locate moments of what I'd call severe fashion on people. I have a tendency to walk up to strangers all the time and tell them that they look fabulous, because they do. And it comes back to me too, which I love that. It happened today. Actually, somebody was like, "I like your shirt." I was like, "There it is. It's coming back." Intense moments of other people's fashion is something that I pay attention to. Like, I really love celebrating other people's fabulous. And some of the materials that I'm drawn to are severe for a particular moment in time, and I like spending a lot of time thinking about who did that, who put that design forward, why did they think, or not why, because why is not really the right question. They thought it was good when they made it, and I like spending a lot of time thinking about that, and then working back into that, like as if I'm emphasizing or using some type of tradition to underline style. And so that's like living inside the work in a way like where I'm actually seeking fashion, but it shows up in architecture, in clothing, in interior design, that's why the materials move around a lot for me, because I can find it in a lot of places.
Yeah, and there's also like a lot of pattern work that happens
Yes.
in texture within your work
Yeah, it's
too.
like multiplying patterns so it wakes back up again. And I know that it's out of style, but I'm also, I've been haunted by the fact that, you guys, do you know the word passé? Have you heard that one before? The secondary meaning of that word is, it's to describe a woman who's past her prime, which I was horrified to find out about. But that turned my screws a little bit, and now I make a lot of artwork about that.
So Diana mentioned red being one of her favorite colors. And I know in a few of your videos, you talk about how important the color red is for your culture. So how do you choose the kind of materials you use for that? And do they hold any cultural or symbolic meaning, which it's your story?
Yeah, I think there's two ways of the ways that I think color. One, in my culture and some of the Mesoamerican cultures, each corner, north, south, and so on, represents a particular color. Blue, yellow, red, and so on. And I believe that the material has chosen me to do the work. And this is not folklorized in my own culture. I found that natural dye, and in my context, that my career started as absolutely no opportunity and no privileges, no funding, no opportunity. In fact, I'm sitting in front of you here. I shouldn't be here. I'm not supposed to be in front of you because the system set up for me to not be here. And so in our culture, we believe that when someone is born, the spiritual leader helps the family to understand the responsibility of the baby to the community. And so to be here and to do what I do, it has to come from someplace else. I never contribute myself to do what I do today. However, it is small or big, but from where I started, it's like just immense opportunity for me to exist as an artist in this time, in this world, and this country. And so I do believe that I'm answering to a DNA information. I do believe that the materials has chosen me to do what I do today. My interaction with the material, it goes beyond the color. The color is a result of the deep interaction and respect and harmony that I have to have with the material itself. And so that is my true understanding when it comes to the material, and the ancestor has chosen me to do the work I do today. And the second part of this is that depending on the type of work that I'm making, if it's for performative piece, if it's something that I wear for a performance, if it's at a tapestry, or I'm working a lot in migration series of work that I've been dyeing with indigo and cochineal insect and other materials too. I really don't stress out a lot about which color I'm gonna use for the particular series, because the subject and the complexity of working with the material is going to find its way. Traditionally, the dyes, the color is being put into the material, and then you weave the piece. My extension of that is I'm trying to understand natural dye and material in a way that it's not traditional. Example, I get to weave one canvas, and then I get to dye the canvas. Like elements like indigo, it's very forgiving once you understand it, so you could actually work with it. I'm not saying it's one of the easiest, but it's very forgiving when you work with it. Other elements, it's extremely complex to work and manipulate, if that's the respectful word for them. And so each piece finds their own way with color depending on the subject, depending on the design, depending what is it that I'm going to do. The rest, I obviously have to dictate, do I want yellow to combine with, pomegranate husk or so on. But I think beyond that, it's really the material and it are the pieces that are going to find their way to exist. That's kind of like the easy part of my practice, I guess you could say.
That's perfect. So we're talking about the manipulation of certain things, even though that's not the right terminology. The next question has a lot to deal with that. So how does failure play a part in the process? Do you want to go first, Chrissy?
Sure. What I've learned working with a lot of different materials over time is that if I come in with an agenda and I pursue the agenda not closely following what's going on with how the material is behaving, I'm missing something. I'm going to get a better piece if I follow the material. And I've learned that over time it's true, that I have to let the material tell me. And it goes on for a long time. Like that turquoise piece that has passed by a few times, that took me over a year to finish because the shuffle of that, it wasn't, there's a certain point I think we can all measure in our own studio practice when you can tell that something is hit, it's like fully cooked state. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a measuring game that goes on for a long time of knowing when to stop. Yeah. I take a ton of photographs when I'm working in my studio practice at the end of each day to measure, like when have I overshot it, when did I undershoot it, when is it just right? So that's an ongoing thing, and the material tells me when it's done.
That's perfect. Diana, how does failure play a part in the process?
Let's see. So I always say that working with natural dyes for me is a collaboration with nature. And I feel that in my studio practice, I'm able to learn patience through working with this material. So I will have a plan in mind. I have like an image that's printed onto fabric. So there's that. But then when it comes to the dyeing portion, so after I print it on fabric, I'll dye it with the different natural dyes. And a lot of the times I don't know what I'm going to get because I have to do, maybe if I'm doing like a shibori technique, for example, I'm looking at these while I'm talking. So I have a lot of different circles that are like radiating out of the center of the orchids. Those are a lot of rubber bands. So each circle is a rubber band that's tied onto the fabric. And that is just like similar to a tie-dye technique or a shibori technique. But I can't really plan that out to an extent. I have to just see what happens and have that grace, give the material grace, and know that I'm working with nature. And I feel like as humans, we always want to kind of control nature, and we want to have it potted in a plan and have it like in our homes and landscape it and figure out how it's going to look on fabric. But I found that over time, if I just continue trying, and we were talking about this yesterday, like just staying curious, I think that plays a role in the process. So failure does happen a lot, but it's about reframing it, and not thinking, okay, because it didn't come out exactly how I want it to, it's a failure. It's not. It's just like part of the process, and then you keep at it until you find that state where you're done, or you feel like it's finished. So, yeah, it's just part of the everyday rhythms of just like continuing to try things out and experiment, and is also what just fascinates me about natural dyes is I feel like I have to give up some control and just let go and see what happens. So and I'm embracing failure and seeing what beauty can come out of that, and how can I tell a story that way too.
Thank you. Porfirio, I think I'm going to ask you the last question. Do you think it's your responsibility to keep traditional fiber arts alive today? And are there any challenges? Gosh. Sorry.
It is not my responsibility at all. No. My work has expanded into using other materials, that it's beyond fiber, that it's beyond tradition, that it's beyond textile. I am tied to a community that, whether I like it or not, I am responsible, as I mentioned earlier. But I do not want to insert myself into a space where I am I'm saying that I'm responsible to keep it alive. It is my responsibility to keep the voice continue. It is my responsibility to continue talking about what's important to me or to my community through whatever ways and materials that is going to happen. Right now, the majority of materials that continues to be textile and fiber. I don't know what's going to happen 5 to 10 years, right? So I want to think that, no, it's not my responsibility, but it might be in some degree.
Chrissy, do you see any challenges in trying to keep this fiber tradition alive?
I do, specifically related to natural dye and the conversation that how it lives in an academic setting, because that's where I function, I'm the chair of the fiber department at MICA currently. I feel like the responsibility in that place, if you are not like a live practitioner of the practice, it's your role, my role, when I find myself in that conversation, is to direct the education to the people who are. So I feel knowing who the dyers are that specialize in those colors, connecting the traditional practice with the person, so the students who are hearing this for the first time get the most direct education from it. It's really important that those names are carried forward, and I feel personally responsible to make those connections in that academic setting, because I am not a natural dyer, even though I'm on this panel. but I, as an educator who speaks in that field, the role of connection is very important, particularly related to this. So, yeah.
And talking on that, so Diana, this will be the last, and then I'll open it up for questions. You put this panel together, as in you picked us to talk about these conversations, and specifically these conversations from different coasts. So we have someone from California, we have the upper coast in Northeast, we're here in the South. There has been a lot of conversation about, what's hot within fiber in the arts community for a while now. I think it's been like 5 years. But there has also been a curiosity in natural dyes and a lot of artists trying to figure out who do we talk to get this kind of information. Do you want to end this conversation with what was the purpose of putting this conversation together here in North Miami in South Florida?
The idea was really to bring people together and have conversations around natural dyeing and dyeing as an art form. I know that your background's in synthetic dyes and you're working in natural dyes, but I wanted to kind of bring that textile conversation to South Florida. I just feel like there isn't a lot of spaces here for conversations like this. I see being born and raised in Miami and seeing how much talent there is here and like amazing artists. I find that there are a lot of textile artists, and but there isn't a lot of places to learn, to share notes, to just share information. And I wanted this conversation to kind of start that and just have just a candid conversation and see like what people are exploring in the different types of fields that textiles can be. Like textiles is such a large umbrella term. You're also working in textiles, but in a different form. So I wanted that to happen here. I feel like a lot of the times people in Miami will study here, maybe go through high school and the different high schools they have here for the arts, but then end up going somewhere else, maybe to New York or other parts of the country to continue their education. And hopefully now that the city is expanding and changing, we see like a return of the Miami, like born and raised or just raised here, learning here, coming back here to work on their practice, to have a studio space to continue the conversation. So I've always wanted to have more awareness around textiles and the breadth that there is in it, because a lot of the times you can get like pigeonholed into this one thing that you do, and I don't want it to be that way. I want it to have its space and for people to just learn about it. So that was really the intent, is just to bring interesting folks and have a great conversation and just share together. And I'm really happy to be here with you guys today for that reason. Yeah.
Thank you. That was perfect. Yeah. I'm like, questions.
Questions, yes, but first, can we just do a thank you and just note of gratitude for our panel, Diana for bringing us all together, Chrissy, Porfirio, and Kandy for leading this. Thank you so much.
You did so good.